Hi, it's Deja from CrochetEverAfter.com, and I'm going to show you now how to create a straight seam when you're working half double crochet in the round. So if you've got a beanie or a cowl and your seam is slanting, I'm going to show you the reasons for it and also how to fix it. So let's get started. Okay, I've come with the promise of creating a half double crochet straight seam, and I will show you how to do it. Unfortunately, it's not going to be the way that you probably want it to be, because I'm going to disappoint you right now by telling you that there really is no way to half double crochet in the round and create a straight seam. As you can see right here, I have a diagonal seam coming up right here. Because of the nature of this stitch, it has 3 loops and it pulls to the right. So if I'm looking this way, it's pulling to the left. If I'm doing like a top-down beanie, the 3 loops, when you yarn over and pull through, you can see that they're all slanting this way. They all want to pull the stitch this way, and that is what causes the slant in your beanie. So if you see my tutorial on a straight seam in single crochet, because it has 2 loops that are essentially a V, it's not pulling, so you can create a straight seam with that stitch. This stitch, unfortunately, because of that pull, no matter what you do, and believe me, I have tried every single way. I've even tried to skip a stitch and go the other way, and that ends up reducing, it takes away that pull. You can see these almost look up and down, but I have a slant the other way. So I've tried many different types of chain 2 as your first stitch, work around, join, don't count your chain 2 and join in the top of your stitch instead of your chain 2, lots of different ways, and you can see every single time I come with a slant. So what I'm going to show you are a couple of ways to either reduce the visibility of the slant, eliminate it completely, and actually make a straight seam, but not a very pretty one, and not quite what you might have in mind, or a completely alternate method. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to do an almost invisible seam. And it's a little bit different, fuzz there, a little bit different than a normal working in the round. So if you're looking here at this half double crochet, if I turn it, you may not be able to catch the seam because I started it right at that seam. It might be a little bit more visible, but my seam is running right here. So you can tell that it's a lot less visible than than one of my other seams that I created. So here's this is like a normal chain 2, which this is the chain 2, so I'm going to move that over. That's the chain 2, and then the join. This, I'm going to show you how I do this now. So I've already joined with a slip stitch here, and what I do to create almost an invisible chain 2 is not chain 2 at all. I actually chain 1, and then I pull it down, so it's almost invisible. And then I half double crochet into the same stitch that I joined my round. So let me actually back up a little so you can see the join. I'll do the last half double. And even though, because you can see my squash down chain 1 right here, and then this is the loop of my first half double, even though I don't have the proper chaining height, you can see that this half double pulls itself up when I join. So it's not going to create a divot in my beanie or whatever I'm making in the round. You can see that they're all the same level, even with a shorter chain. So I do my last half double crochet of my my round, and then I'm going to join to the first stitch of that round. So not the chain, I joined straight into the first half double crochet I created. So I slip stitch it, and then you can pull that tight too. That'll create a less visible join. these are my slip stitches right here coming across. If you tighten it down, it'll make it less visible. And then I'm going to chain one and tighten it down. This is just like the creating an invisible seam with single crochet, which is kind of funny because it's not single crochet. And then I'm going to half double crochet right into that where I joined, so that very first half double of the row below, which is the same as my single crochet tutorial. But in single crochet, I create a straight seam doing this. In half double, it will not do it, because as you see, as I half double, when I pull this through, all of these loops pull to the right. So when I'm working from top to bottom, if this was a beanie, when you have it the right side up, the slant is to the left, and when I have it upside down, the slant is slanting to the right, because that's the way my stitches are pulling. So if I continue around and then I join in that first stitch again and do those same steps, it creates a lot less visible seam. It just looks like double crochets all the way around. So that is one way to minimize the look of that slant, so it's almost invisible. So let's move on to the way to eliminate it completely, and that is, of course, working in a spiral. So there are no joins. You're just, except for the only part that you kind of see is when you do the first half double into your first ring, because it jumps up a little, so you do have kind of a funky little spot there. But as you can see, when you work in a spiral, you have no joins. So to work in a spiral, all you're doing is just half double crocheting around the entire work continuously. You're not joining anywhere. And of course, most of us know how to do the spiral. Most of us make our beanies in a spiral because of this problem of the slanting seam. So we all know how to do it. If you don't know how to do it, I do have a tutorial on how to half double crochet in the spiral, and it'll show you how to make that jump in that first round. But let me show you what happens when you finish off. So you see, if I were to fasten off right here, I have, let me try to get the white backdrop so you can really see the difference in size. I have this huge space between this stitch and this stitch. So what I do to minimize that is I will actually single crochet in the next stitch to bring it down a little bit, and then I'll slip stitch in the stitch after to bring it down even more. And what that does is it kind of flattens out my stitches so that when I'm looking at it, there's not this big offset. So again, you're just kind of working your stitches down in height. So you have a half double, you work down one by doing a single crochet, and then in the next stitch, slip stitch to fasten it off, and then do your little fasten off. Another option to make it even less visible is to do another row of single crochet or slip stitching in the same color, or even a contrasting color would make it even less visible, so you could put a nice contrasting color single crochet edge around the entire thing. So that's how you can eliminate it completely. And then I promised you a straight seam, so here it goes. Sorry guys, it's not the prettiest, but it is straight. So here is my straight seam. You can see it going right up here. It's pretty visible because it's not very pretty. And you'll notice that the stitches look strange. So, the way to make a straight seam in half double crochet is at the end of each join of your rows, you're going to turn. And you're going to work the opposite way that you just worked. I'm sorry, I said row earlier. You're going to work the opposite way of your rounds. So if I just worked this way around and I join, I'm going to stop, turn it, and work backwards. So it's almost like you're working in rows, except you're joining it into a circle. So I started off with my 8 half double crochets. Let me pull this tail here to the inside so you can see easier. I started off with 8 half double crochets, then I joined it, and I joined it right here. And then I turned my work, and I worked backwards for another 8. And I did this all the way on the increasing also so that I would have a uniform look. I could have increased in just going in a circle because you're going to have a slanted seam no matter what you do with your increasing, except of course unless you turn it, because you can see my seam is actually quite straight on my increasing. But to keep the look of this fabric that I have going, I did alternating rounds all the way up. So now I'm going to work this way on my round, I'll join it, and then I'll turn around and I'll work back. And because I'm doing the slanting one way and then the slanting the other way each round, I'm creating a straight seam overall. And it's not that pretty, as you can see it's quite visible, so this may not be the best solution, but it can create kind of a neat effect if you're making, say, a beanie. It can give it a little bit more texture looking. If you're going to be putting something down the center, like some of those mohawk beanies or dinosaur beanies where you have spikes or yarn sticking out, this can be completely hidden by those, so this can be an option if your pattern is written in half double crochet and you really don't like the look of the join, the slanted join, or just work it in a spiral. So that is how you make your straight seam. I'm sorry that it is not probably what you were hoping for, but it is possible if you're willing to work in kind of rows in the round is what I call it, because you're working back and forth like you're working in rows. It's just at the join you're joining up. So let me show you real quick the join part, because I didn't even show you that. So, and it's going to be the same as my invisible round where I slip stitch into that first stitch half double crochet, because this really creates the least visible seam. Pull it tight and then chain 1, and you can turn it and then begin. And when you begin, you're going to begin in that join, so it's kind of small at first, but don't go into this first stitch, go into that join. It's a little bit difficult to see, and it's about half the size of your other stitches, but by doing that stitch you'll keep your seam straight. If you work into this first stitch, you're going to have kind of a wiggly seam. So make sure you work into the join when you do it. And then just continue around. And I've tried different types of joins. This one is the chain 2 join, and the slip stitch is not pulled tight. So you can see it's quite visible. I have this one here. This I ignored the chain 2, and then I joined into the first stitch of my round. So I did make a regular size chain 2, but when I joined, I skipped the chain 2 and I went into the first stitch. And what it creates is this kind of overlapped fabric. So it's quite a thick seam. So don't ignore your chain 2. If you don't like any of my methods and you still want to use the chain 2, just be sure that you work into the chain 2 when you join. Don't join in your first stitch, because this is what you're going to get. You're going to get a doubled up fabric that's really noticeable. So that is how you are going to create a semi-straight yet not attractive seam in half double crochet, or you can use one of those other methods to do it. And if you have any questions, just leave comments below, and I will try to help you out as best I can and clear up any questions you may have. Thanks.